Hello everyone, and welcome to Dutch Greybeard. 2024 is nearing its end. As I'm recording this, it's November 10th, so we have a good 1.5 months left. I believe this is a good moment to look back at all the 5-star books I've read so far. This also gives me an opportunity to answer a question several viewers have asked me. How does my rating system work? I will also get into what I call the pick-up ability of a book. What is that, and how does it compare to the normal rating? Let's start with a few words about my rating system, which can hardly be called a system, really. Regular viewers of this channel know by now that I rate books within the range of 1 to 100 points. This gives me more wiggle room to nuance my rating of a book than the mere 10 options the 5-star system has available. For instance, with the 4-star range, I can go from 76 points to 85 points. Let me clarify this by looking at a few books in the Discworld by Terry Pratchett. Of all the Discworld books I've read so far, I like Mort, which I just reviewed, the best. I gave it 84 points, which is almost the highest position within the 4-star range. Wintersmith received 76 points from me, and The Wee Free Men, which I liked just a bit more, 78 points out of 100. This means that all 3 books scored 4 stars. But within the 100 points rating, I can show the difference in my appreciation of them. Some booktubers truly have a system with different categories that they rate separately, which results in a concluding rating. My system is based on gut feeling for the most part. I also compare my intended rating for a new book with the other books I've already rated, just to verify if it still makes sense. It's not uncommon for me to adjust my initial rating in the days or weeks after I finished a book. This usually deviates just 1 or 2 points at most from my initial rating. So, no system, but plenty of room to differentiate between the various books. A couple of months ago, I started to give books a pick-up ability rating as well. Not all the books, but most of them. Actually, the word says it all. How eager am I to pick up the book and continue reading it? The pick-up ability is only partially related to my appreciation of the book and its final rating. In my last wrap-up video, the book with a pick-up ability of 100% scored 90 points out of 100, while the best book in that video with 97 points out of 100 had a pick-up ability of 90%. The eagerness of wanting to continue reading in a book coincides with many factors. Like with Oathbringer, the book I'm reading right now, the pick-up ability has increased considerably after I passed the halfway point of the book. The first, say, 500 to 600 pages, I'm looking at the huge chunk I'm holding in my right hand, meaning the pages I still have to read. But after I've turned the 50% mark of the page count, it feels as if I'm going downhill somehow. Then it is, in a way, much more attractive to pick up the book for another reading session. A usual rule of thumb: the further I go into a book, the higher its pick-up ability. What helps, of course, is that the story at the end of a book is coming to a close, with reveals, apotheoses, conclusions, or Sanderlanches. So the pick-up ability can change during the course of reading a book. Also, to me, my general state of being can influence how eager I am to continue to read. When I am energetic and clear-headed, the pick-up ability of any book is higher than when I'm tired or a bit down. Another factor is how many words there are on a page. The font size of Oathbringer, in my paperback edition, is much smaller than it is in The Way of Kings and Words of Radiance. Those books respectively have 383 and 399,000 words, while Oathbringer has almost 452,000 words. The first 2 in the series have 39 lines per page, while Oathbringer has 43 lines per page. The publisher somehow had to get much more words within the available 1,300 or so pages. There are more factors into play here, but obviously the story and the writing style are very important. I absolutely love the writing of Guy Gavriel Kay in the Fionavar Tapestry, but it was challenging at times. This resulted in a rather low pickup ability of around 70%. The easier the writing style, the higher the pickup ability of a book, which does not necessarily correspond to my appreciation of it. So, with my rating system and pickup ability explained, let's see which books in 2024 were awarded with 5 stars or 96 points and higher. I rarely give 5 stars to a book, but it happens. I hardly ever give a book 1 star or even lower. 40 points out of 100 is about the lowest I rate a book generally. This probably has to do with my knowledge of how incredibly difficult it is to write a book, let alone a good book. The effort a writer has put into making a book alone deserves credit in my eyes. Even when it's a bad or sloppy book, I can appreciate the work that was put into it. A 5-star book, in my eyes, is truly a very exceptional book, and those are rare. In fact, these past 10.5 months have resulted in only 6 genuine 5-star books for me. Even though I haven't finished reading Oathbringer yet, I'm at about 70% at the moment, I can safely predict that this will be another 5-star book. Counting Oathbringer, I have read 54 books in 2024 so far, and out of those only 6 got a 5-star rating, which is not a lot. But it doesn't mean that I've had a bad reading year so far, quite the contrary. I only DNF'd 2 books and my lowest rating was 44 points out of 100. The average score of all the books I've read so far is 81.5 points out of 100, which is a decent 4 stars for this whole reading year. Not bad at all. There are quite a few books that came very close to being a 5-star read. Let me just name the top 10 of those that came very close. If there is a separate video on any of the books mentioned here, you can find the link to it in the description below. First, The Lies of Loch Lamora by Scott Lynch. I read this book in April and gave it 91 points out of 100. The next 3 books scored 92 points out of 100. They are Friendship with God by Neil Donald Walsh, which I read in September, The Wandering Fire by Guy Gavriel Kay, which I read in August, and Dragon Song by Anne McCaffrey, which I read in March of this year. Then 3 books that scored 93 points out of 100. In January, I finished reading the Farseer trilogy by Robin Hobb with Assassin's Quest. The other 2 I both read in May. Warbreaker by Brandon Sanderson and A Memory of Light, the final book in the Wheel of Time by Robert Jordan and Brandon Sanderson. Another Wheel of Time book, namely Towers of Midnight, also co-written by Brandon Sanderson, scored 94 points out of 100, only 2 points below the 5-star mark. I read this one in February. And finally, 2 books that scored 95 points, so that is the closest to 5 stars, but it's still 4.5. They are The Gathering Storm, book 12 in the Wheel of Time, also by Jordan and Sanderson, and a Dutch book called Etty Hillesum, Het Verhaal van haar leven, The Story of Her Life, written by Judith Koelemeijer. This book is the biography of Etty Hillesum. She was a Dutch writer who was killed by the Nazis during World War II. So, here are the 6 genuine 5 stars for 2024 so far. With 96 points out of 100, we have a novel by Dutch author Leon de Winter called Stad van de Honden, City of the Dogs. I'm afraid it's not translated into English. I read this book in April of this year. Leon de Winter is an automatic author for me. This short novel of 206 pages is nothing less than a masterpiece. Our main character, Jaap Hollander, is a renowned brain surgeon who agrees to perform an operation on the daughter of a very important and influential leader of a country in the Middle East. The book has many threads and interconnections that not only make this into a thrilling read, but also very profound in scope and meaning. After the almost impossible surgery, Jaap gets sucked into a surrealistic world where a dog talks to him and guides him to the location where Jaap's daughter disappeared 10 years ago. Stad van de Honden is an absolutely beautiful novel with rich and poetic prose and a gripping and emotional story. Everything gets explained in the end and all the pieces fit together. There's a good reason why Leon de Winter is one of my automatic authors. Next we have the 3 Stormlight archive books I have read so far. Well, technically I'm still reading Oathbringer, but I'm fairly sure that this is going to be a 5-star book for me as well. Perhaps even slightly higher than The Way of Kings and Words of Radiance. Those 2 books scored 97 points out of 100. I read the first one in August and the second one for the most part in September and a few days of October. I am taking my time with Oathbringer, which I started reading on October 20. The idea was to read all 4 of the published books before number 5, Wind and Truth, will be released on December 6 this year. At this point, I don't think I will be able to pull that off. Before starting with The Rhythm of War, I want to read the short novella Sixth of the Dusk and Dawnshard. But perhaps more importantly, I think I need some time away from Roshar and the Cosmere. No, perhaps a better way of putting it is I need some time away from the feeling of imprisonment these extremely chunky books give me. As I mentioned in the section about pickup ability, the first half of a Stormlight archive book can feel like an uphill endeavor. I didn't experience that so much in The Way of Kings because everything was new to me. But in Words of Radiance, the impressive number of pages ahead of me was very daunting, which I experienced even stronger with Oathbringer. Because I want to fully enjoy the mastery of Sanderson's writing, I think a small break will be good. As soon as reading starts to feel as a chore, something's definitely off. Of course, I don't have a rating for Oathbringer yet, but if I had to make a guess, it's going to be 97 points or perhaps even 98. We'll see. 98 points is the rating I gave to the remaining 2 5-star books. Let's first mention Duncton Quest by William Horwood. This was a reread I did on audio. It is the second book in his Duncton Chronicles, which I've talked about multiple times on this channel already. Just amazing and overwhelming. I started listening to this one in November of 2023, but because I'm extremely slow with audio, I finished it at the end of February this year. Recently I finished the 3rd book in this series, also on audio, Duncton Found. This one kept me occupied for about 7 months. Duncton Found got 90 points out of 100. On this reread, it simply didn't grab me by the throat like the other 2 books in this trilogy did. Even though I love the story, the telling of it was a bit slow at times, but Duncton Quest fully deserves the 98 points out of 100. As does Piranesi by Susanna Clarke, my last 5-star book of 2024. This one I read in 2 sittings in May, and it's a very good contender for my book of the year. This surrealistic story, which perhaps can best be described as literary fantasy, remains in my thoughts to this day, even though I read it in May. I am in awe of Susanna Clarke's craftsmanship and her rich and profound imagination. Apart from one minor thing that struck me a little bit unrealistic, this book is simply perfect. I talk more in detail about this in my separate video. Now, 2024 is not over yet. So perhaps I can add 1 or maybe 2 5-star reads to this list. I have no idea what I'll be reading these coming weeks, but I've already put aside 3 books that are highest on my TBR. Daughter of Empire, the first book in the Empire trilogy written by Jenny Wirtz and Raymond T. Feist. The Blade itself, the beginning of the First Law trilogy by Joe Abercrombie, and Trader's Blade, the first book in the Greatcoats series by Sébastien de Castell. Let me know which of these books you think I should pick up after I finish Oathbringer. Thank you very much for watching this video. Until we meet again at Dutch Greybeard.